Hello and welcome to our podcast, I'm Blown. We do this podcast together, Siddarth, my co host, and myself, Atul. We do this podcast bringing you interesting talk about I'm Blown moments that we've had related to marketing in India and consumers. Today's episode, interestingly, is about Indians, but not about the Indian market. Let's talk about something interesting today.
Atul, we're going to talk about Parle G. It's one of my favorite brands. And when you mentioned that the sheer number of Parle Gs that sell in the US, I was quite shocked.
Yeah.
In fact, let's put it this way. Yes, I thought it's intuitive that a lot of Indians will be having Parle, but the sheer number of them, that was shocking. And before we get into it, I want to talk about my experience with Parle G.
Go ahead.
You would know that I've lived a large part of my life in Dubai.
Yeah.
Up till school. And then I came to India and I was staying out of Bombay. I don't really remember eating a lot of Parle G. But what I do remember is when I used to take the local train, which is from Churchgate all the way to Andheri. And if you've taken that 45-minute ride, it's quite a ride. But in that 45 minutes, there is this 3 seconds of absolute pleasure. You know what those 3 seconds were?
I don't actually.
If you've never done this, you should do it, which is, of course, now you don't have the opportunity to do it. But when you move from Churchgate to Andheri, there's a small stretch of land where there's a Parle G factory. And they were making Parle G biscuits. And at that point in time, when you passed by, you would get that fragrance and that whiff.
That is amazing.
And that's my memory of Parle G. In that 45 minutes of absolute chaos and hell, there is this 3 seconds of absolute beauty.
Yeah.
So therefore, Parle G, my memory of Parle G is that. And then when I started doing sales, which is, going into Madhya Pradesh and, really remote villages in Madhya Pradesh, very often when you used to get hungry, the only thing that used to, go towards was Parle G.
Yeah.
And Parle G was my go-to, almost out of desperation. But that hunger fill is my memory of Parle G, which is why I'm super excited.
And you're unlikely to get your stomach upset with Parle G biscuits, right? That's amazing. And the reason I was telling you that anecdotal thing about the sheer volumes of biscuits of Parle G sold in the US was because of my story with my brother who moved to the US many decades ago. And we used to go visit him and we used to find Parle G biscuits at home. And I used to always wonder, why is he eating Parle G biscuits? And that's what, kind of made me suggest that we talk about this. And it's that emotional connection. And we'll get into it, like you were saying, various levels of how it works. But he would always go to the Indian store, as many Indians do in the US, whether it's on the West Coast, East Coast, wherever they are. And they just buy packets and packets of Parle G and Frooti, which a lot of people in India, it's not a nice thing to say, but have graduated from Frooti onto other drinks, maybe healthier drinks, maybe tastier drinks. But Indians in the US are still drinking Frooti and Parle G biscuits. Interesting combination. Let's talk about it more.
So you're saying that your brother in the US, I can understand, probably coming to India and taking a few Parle G biscuits.
Right.
I can talk about that. But in the US, which is these great big box stores, and biscuit category starts from kilometer 1 to kilometer 10.
Absolutely.
So many options.
Absolutely.
That they still went to an Indian store and bought Parle G.
Absolutely. So they may be buying American cookies like the chocolate chip and the Oreos and all of that, but there would always be the go-to biscuit for my brother, which was Parle G.
Interesting. So let's talk about what do you think would be what's driving your brother to buy more Parle G?
I think the obvious first level is nostalgia, right? It's a piece of your childhood coming back to you. We have our own versions of it, and I'm sure from your childhood living in the Gulf would have its own connections. I had my own connection. It wasn't quite Parle G, but it was glucose biscuits because glucose biscuits were what we got when we were kids, right? You didn't have all the other options that you have today. And I remember that my mom used to give me a packet of biscuits in the morning, sometimes almost like breakfast, sometimes to take to school. There was no time for lunch or whatever. So here's a packet of biscuits and that's what you have. And it was just that feeling of, it's a little bit of your childhood back to you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what connects Indians who live in the US even today. And US is just an example. It's all over the world. Yeah. And I think that piece of your childhood is a crucial part of the buying behavior.
And I'm assuming someone in the US needs nostalgia more than us who are living our lived reality in India. In fact, interesting that you mentioned nostalgia. Just the other day, I was so excited that when I found Poppins in the store, and we don't see poppins as often now. It's not that it's not there. I think it's getting lost in the clutter. That I really wanted to try them. So even my sort of so-called nostalgia and imagery of childhood about downing those poppins in a long car journey, and I wanted my son to sort of also taste it. It was truly driven by nostalgia. There were probably far better sweets that I could have bought from the store, but just the fact that I saw poppins, you know what, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to down these poppins like never before.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is the price inelasticity.
Okay.
I mean, whenever I've seen Parle G biscuits on the shelf in Indian stores, they are, needless to say, 3x or 4x in terms of price compared to India. And yet they fly off the shelves. Because what you're buying is not the product.
Yeah.
What you're buying is the emotion related to the product.
Correct.
And that feeling that you get, not only, and nostalgia is one part of it, the other part of it is somewhere it hits taste buds. As we all know, food is emotion very often more than practicality.
Yeah.
And it's hitting your taste buds somewhere of emotions far more than which an Oreo biscuit can, for example, as Oreo is in the US. So I think that beyond nostalgia, it's a taste buds, your emotions, your feelings that I think is in play.
That's actually very insightful. So we all know the Coke and Pepsi story about the blind test, about how about 20, 30 years back, Pepsi did this blind test and people preferred Pepsi over Coke.
Yep.
And they did gain some share, but even now in the United States of America, Coke's still the leader. And a couple of neuroscientists wanted to figure out, why is that the case? Why is it that a tastier product, at least claimed tastier, a blind test, is not working out when consumers are actually buying from the market? And what they realized is they did this test where now they redid the blind test. This time they put fMRI machines to check where's the blood flow in the brain.
Yeah.
And very interestingly enough, they first gave the consumer 2 glasses of colored water. They didn't know which was Pepsi, which was Coke. And needless to say, people who were drinking Pepsi were saying this is better than the Coke. But here's the beauty of it. There's a part of your brain that recognizes taste. So when they were actually having Pepsi in a blind taste, that part of the brain was seeing a blood flow.
Right.
So in other words, the brain was actually reacting and telling you, this is tastier.
Right.
The same consumer was then given 2 cans. Right? One a Pepsi blue can and one a Coke red.
Right.
Guess what happened? That same consumer, now when they were consuming Coke, where was the blood flow in the part happening? It was happening when you were drinking Coke and not when you were drinking Pepsi.
That's interesting. And even though the drinks were the same.
Same. So, and the emotional part of the brain, which is the limbic system, was getting activated when you saw Coke. So what that essentially tells you, I mean, to simplify it, to reduce it, the brain is predicting taste, which is what you're saying. So when I, in the US, see all the brands of, and I see a Parle G, my brain is already predicting that this is tastier than the rest.
Brilliant.
So yes, I think one of the reasons why we reach out to products that we are familiar with is because we're so familiar with it. I mean, I think Cadbury's is a great product globally, but the Cadbury Dairy Milk taste in India, we've been having it for donkey's years. We're predicting that this is better than that. So there is a prediction of taste.
Yeah.
Or as you said, there's this part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain that gets wired when you see something so familiar.
But in terms of, and just to talk about the marketing aspect of it, how long does this last? Generationally, I mean, for someone who's grown up in India and moved to the US, obviously the connections are strong and very clear. Does it go on to the next generation? The next generation, unlikely, because that nostalgia factor is not there. The next generation is developing their own, childhood memories, so to speak. But there is a curiosity, and I see this with people I know, friends, and my brother, of course, that their children, who are American for all practical purposes, do try, because their father swears by that Parle G and says, this is great. Even though probably, it's not that great compared to other biscuits and cookies, but they try it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they do like it and they have a shared experience with their parent. And that's interesting that there may be some transference there, but it's unlikely to be strong enough for that to kind of grow the market for a brand like Parle G or Frooti or whoever it might be.
It's a fair point. So what you're saying is, over a period of time, Parle G may not be as popular in the US as generations and
Absolutely.
the
With
second
the
generation.
diaspora.
But I still think taste is cultural. So let me explain that.
Right.
Okay. My wife's cousins, when they come to the US, and of course they get a lot of goodies for the kids, the one thing that they want to take back is the magic masala chips. Right?
Interesting.
That's the flavor that they're used to. That's what they have at home, the masala, the pickle flavor. So the one thing they want to take home is the magic masala chips. And the magic masala chips may not be the most number one flavor in India, but those people want to take back. So maybe the brand does not transfer, but I think taste is very cultural.
So there's something beyond nostalgia.
Yeah.
There's a culture factor to it which gets layered on top of nostalgia.
Food is incredibly cultural. I mean, the more I work in the food space, it is so rooted. We did this episode on vegetarian and non-vegetarian. We talked about how important fish is to the South. It's incredibly cultural. I remember just a side point. I never liked fish. I was a meat eater, but I never liked fish.
Well,
and I had
considering where you're from, that's shocking.
Separate. I mean, I told you that I've never lived in Kerala, and my family in Kerala was pure vegetarian, one of the odd 2% or 3%ers in Kerala. But I never liked fish. I used to have chicken. I used to have meat. But I had a stint in Jharkhand, about a 1-month stint with the company I was working there, and I was staying in a PG accommodation with a lovely Bengali family.
Oh wow!
And I went there, and I think I landed sometime in the evening, put my bags in, and she says, "What? You definitely have fish, no?" So I couldn't say.
You froze.
No, I froze. And I said, "Yeah, okay," because I didn't want her to deviate from her norm. And that's how I started eating fish. It was forced down my throat. But over a period of time, I developed taste. So now I'm enjoying fish a lot more than I used to. So I think food is incredibly cultural. So when you go to Bengal, you will get fish. That's true.
Yeah. And when we were discussing earlier, we were wondering, Sid, whether there's a reverse effect, like you were talking of perceptions, and we were talking about how biscuits 15, 20 years ago in India, you got obviously a whole lot of Indian biscuits, but you got some foreign brands like an Oreo, which only were available imported, so to speak. And a lot of people would eat those purely because they were imported, because of the perception of that. Now, there's no cultural aspect in play there. There's absolutely, obviously, no nostalgia in play there. The only thing that's really driving that is a perception that this is something better than what is available to me, or at least it triggers a certain thing. So, is there more of that possible? Is it possible that you can build a certain brand equity around something purely because it is not available to all? Which is slightly different from a premium positioning, because a premium positioning is often on price. But is there something that because this is completely non-cultural, is there anything interesting there?
I think to you and me, and it's an interesting point that you're saying. So, would I feel that an imported product or something I get in India would taste better? I think to you and me, probably the case, because we're used to having that level of scarcity. That Toblerone has come
in our generation.
Okay. I might be getting Toblerone here, but that Toblerone that's come from there, But now when I see my children, and I remember I stayed in Dubai, and we were enamored the first time I went to Dubai about all these big stores and the range and the availability. But if I take mine, and I've taken my children now to Dubai and the US, they're not enamored by it at all, because they do get it in India. Right? So I don't think they value imported, come from outside as much as probably we valued it, because for us, that the family member who came down and opened the suitcase, and you're seeing the tangs and the chocolates, we're like, wow, this is what I'm going to,
which is really the scarcity mindset of the 70s and the 80s that we've lived through.
I don't think our children, at least at our SEC or NCCS level, they have not seen that scarcity. So when they go abroad, they say, this is a mall, I get that in India as well, so it's not so scarce. But it's an interesting point. I think you and me, we would still love that scarcity. Something that's come from abroad, we would probably taste.
Better, cue taste, cue value.
Cue taste.
So interesting, this Parle G thing, I mean, it's a very, you and I have been talking about the Indian market, Indian consumer behavior, how Indian brands are marketing, brands in India rather. But when I first experienced this Parle G moment, it was a real I'm blown moment for it. But I'm talking about maybe 15, 20 years ago when I first saw it. And we were talking the other day when it was a I'm blown moment for me to, kind of think about it again. So nostalgia, cultural aspects of food and taste play a damn good role in why Parle G and something like Frooti have kind of developed as a brand in the US.
Yeah. Have you ever been to a Patel store in the US?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
So
quite an experience it is,
I
have to say. Yeah.
When we live in India, we never really think of bakeries, and bakeries is a very new phenomenon, maybe the last 15, 20 years. When you close your eyes, you think of a bakery, you think of the smell, you think of the breads, you think of the modern formats of cakes and sourdoughs, and there's a baker baking it. If you go to a Patel store in India, that bakery is truly about
India. In the US.
In the US, sorry. In the US. It's truly about India. So if you ever go to a Patel store, it's a big supermarket, but there's a baker there who's making rotis. And not just making rotis, different types of rotis, but behind him is a full warehouse of rotis, piled up to some 1,000 rotis a pile, and there's some 10 piles piled up. That is quite an experience. That's
fascinating. It's a fascinating experience to see that.
It's fascinating, and that's a true aspect that even the diaspora in India, cutting across generations, we still love the Indian food, the food that. And I'm assuming even generations who are sort of now lived in the US for all their life, they're still eating Indian food at home. So that's a taste and a flavor that they still sort of jump onto. So when they come to India, they want to have the kebabs and the stuffed chicken, and they're really enjoying that sort of experience. What else? Is there anything else that sort of you think is driving this?
While I was reading a lot about the Indian brand, so to speak, for the diaspora, I came across a lot of similar aspects to Eastern Asian brands which have made it to the US, whether those are Chinese snack products or more than Chinese is Japanese and Korean. And there are a whole lot of these candy brands from Japan which are and there was one that I was looking at, Poki Life or something like that, which is basically a chocolate covered biscuit stick.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Right? And those are apparently fairly huge mainstream in the US as well now. So what they've managed to do is take something which was very clearly a Japanese snack, came to the US basically as a Japanese snack for Japanese diaspora, and has now gone mainstream, and people are actually buying people are actually buying them who are regular Americans and actually enjoying that product far more than just Japanese people. So I was actually thinking that, can Parle G go mainstream in the US?
Interesting.
I'm not so sure about that, but is there a way for the brand to do that? I don't know.
So sushi is probably just that, and it's big in the US. In India, for example, if you go to Gurgaon, it's peppered with Korean and Japanese restaurants because there's a lot of diaspora there.
But Indians are enjoying them as much.
And there are a whole bunch of startups now in India and the US apparently that are selling chas. Right? They're trying to make it mainstream. Not just of course, there's a big Indian diaspora that would love that product, but they're trying to make it mainstream in the US as well. So clearly,
as a health drink, I assume.
As maybe a health drink, chas protein, they'll add a little bit of twist to it, but they'll contextualize it to that world, but it's still very much Indian. So yeah, that's an interesting point. So can an Indian brand, can they go mainstream? Totally. And I think there's a lot of allure for India in the Western world. I can see that play out in, let's say, personal care.
Maybe.
With an Indian name like Forest Essentials or Himalaya, I'm sure it'll do really well over there. It'll be interesting to see whether food can also do that. To that point, I have a question. Do you see any of the new brands in India who can do what Parle G or a Haldiram has done in the US? Anything comes to mind? I have one, and I'm going to pull that out.
I'm guessing you mentioned personal care, that's possible. But if you're specifically asking about food products, I think it'll have to be something which has a strong ethnicity connected to it, which probably not Parle G, but Haldiram's has going for it. Something which is strongly ethnic, very, very Indian. You know how yoga is very, very popular in the US and so on. What was the example you had in mind?
I think one of the recent trends that we're seeing in especially beverages is very Indianized beverages. So the Jeera, Lahori Jeera and Rimzim Jeera, I think those can really go mainstream in the US, according to me. The one brand I'd love to see go mainstream is one of my favorite products. I still remember that. It's my childhood, which is Amul butter.
Mm.
I think the taste of Amul butter, and maybe it's my brain telling me otherwise, but that is completely unique. I have not seen that anywhere else.
Yeah, that is true. The butter is totally, it's like a different product.
And completely. I haven't seen anything else. And I would love for Amul butter to go mainstream and tell the world what butter should really taste like.
Fascinating, interesting. From where to where it's an incredible conversation for not really Indian products. Made by Indian companies, made differently. In some cases, taken to different parts of the world, like we talked about Parle G, Frooti, possibly Amul butter someday. Let's see.
Let's hope so. Wonderful. Interesting conversation again.
Absolutely, yeah.
Many things unearthed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we know that the diaspora is big there, and that's why they're buying it. But if you really skim down to what could be the reasons, we came up with some very unique reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Nostalgia, for one, that was clearly called out, which is saying, listen, something that I've had in the past cues taste to me, and I know that that's tasty, and I want to just relive that one more time, or a couple of more times. I think nostalgia plays a huge role.
And food as culture, always something strong, like you suggested, and food as a strong cultural driver of eating habits, family habits, values, and so on is
the brain's a predictor. I truly believe that if I see a packaged product that I know has been tasty in the past, my brain's already predicting that to be tasted and something I'm not familiar with. And I think that's great. Did you know that restaurants now, I think the brain cues taste through also surround sound.
So sound as well, is it? I thought it was all about smell,
so
aroma.
It's smell. So if you see restaurants today, you get the smell. If you see restaurants today, the kitchen is open, so you see someone work hard for your food. And if you see restaurants today, they create seating with ambient sound. That ambient sound, that seating actually makes you consume more. It cues taste, it cues better. It's been proven that if you have food by yourself, you'll have a lot lesser, of course, unless you're binging or something, than let's say in a gathering, you're sitting for 2-3 hours and you're chatting without really knowing you're eating a lot more. So food is not just about the product. It's
not
about
just
everything else around
so much
it.
going around it.
So much going around it.
The experiences are so important compared to product, right? And I really do think that experiences are something that's going to drive a lot of. The whole thing is an experience. I mean, whether we're talking about the Parle G thing, nostalgia, culture, everything kind of blends into each other.
For me, Parle G has always been about hunger fill. So if I'm feeling hungry and I'm in this market, I'm going to jump and buy a Parle G. Not because it's the tastiest thing there, but it's the one that I believe will solve my hunger fill problem.
Interesting episode that we've talked about here. Sid, not the Indian market, but it's still about Indians. Would love your feedback on this. It's been great chatting, and we'd love to come back to you with more and more episodes like this for the I'm Blown podcast. My co-host Siddarth and I.
See you guys next time. Do drop in your comments. We'd love to hear more from you. Bye.